got Zig coming in at the top. Today on the show, we have Ev Gold from Cinema Cinema, a band inspired by the philosophies of getting to the van and following their own creed and making their own music and not caring what others think about it, but only trying to seek those who appreciate creation in its purest form. And this ambition led them to be getting in the van and driving to opening for Black Flag. Cinema's got a new album out. It's called CCXMD 2, a very free jazz inspired album. There's 2 volumes of it. The first one's been out, it's on all streaming platforms, and this next one will be too. We're going to listen to the track Continued off of CCXMD 2. Continued off the album CCXMD2. Now, this can't be a good judge for Cinema because this is just one track that sounds nothing else like their discography. So I recommend you check out some of their earlier works. They're a little more punk and makes sense why they opened for Black Flag if you listen to some of their earlier works. But this record, they're sticking to it. This record's got its own sound, its own feel, and the tracks are fairly lengthy. So this is why the reason I went with this song is one is it gets a whole band capture, but also is long enough that we can hear it and get into the interview. So with that being said, if you can like, follow, subscribe, rate, review the podcast on all the podcast platforms, it helps me keep talking to cool guests and getting inspiration to share that with you. And without further ado, here's Ev Gold. Cool. Well, first question is, what happened to the trumpet?
Were you anticipating trumpet, or do you mean just why isn't the trumpet covered in our in this outing?
No, I mean like with
or,
you.
Or do you mean
you playing the trumpet?
Oh, my personal experience playing the trumpet.
Yeah.
Wow, I'm pretty floored that to think that someone might have done any sort of research that on us or me ahead of time, being that I did a quick bit of research on your podcast, but I can only glean so much by tapping on the most recent, like episode, etc. But
well, thanks.
that being said, what happened? Oh, yeah. Well, I want to respect the time that you're spending by knowing at least what I'm going to try to, approach, not just blindly coming in. But that being said, the trumpet. Wow, thank you for starting off with a personal question. The trumpet came about in junior high school for me, and that was That actually was right before I started to learn how to play guitar. I already knew I wanted to be a vocalist as a little kid. I just had this voice that was inside me that had to get out, and singing in the mirror and screaming in the shower, or screaming in the shower and singing in the mirror, or doing either in the rain. I'm not sure, but whatever was happening when I was a kid, it felt really natural doing that. So I knew I wanted to be a vocalist. I had a lot to say. I felt like I wanted to write lyrics, but I felt like I would, you know, play more of a conventional rock instrument, I guess, is what I had first thought when that first crossed my mind. I first got like really bit by the be a musician bug around the age of 9. And that was because Guns N' Roses came into and rocked my world in 1987. So I'm sorry to get so far off the trumpet that now I'm
No, it's
talking
good.
about Guns N' Roses, but let me stay with this. Music really didn't really stir me too much until Guns N' Roses like totally upended me when I was 9. I didn't understand it. It was crazy. It seemed dangerous. Like the songs had curse words. These guys were crazy, and it just had an energy. It just drew me in. Such a different world it was in 1987. Kind of like finding out about them through MTV, that kind of filter, etc. And just what I'm getting at is I felt motivated, like, oh wow, I think I want to do a band, yeah. And I started to like look into like rock and roll as this thing to study. I listened to like what Guns N' Roses said in an interview, and they mentioned the Stones, or they mentioned the Sex Pistols, they mentioned Black Sabbath. I'm like, I should find those things, because there was that mystique back then. There wasn't a
Right.
search engine at my fingertips. I couldn't just go to my phone and Google. I was like, oh, I must come across these things in my future, in my future endeavors. I have to keep my eyes open. So it was this like mythical little journey that opened into like wanting to be in a band, and a rock band. So I wasn't thinking too much about the trumpet or other wind instruments. So I had no idea yet about things like Miles Davis or anything. It was just so early. So when I first was thinking I'm going to sing, and then I want to learn how to play some kind of like guitar or drums, I'm not sure. There I am. I'm in junior high school like a year later, and I'm in band, and I'm thrust in, and trumpet is what wound up in my hands, and I made it to second trumpet. I made it
That's
to
pretty
second
good.
seat. I made it to second seat, and it was, I think the challenge from what I recall was adjusting to the reverberation you have to achieve with your lips
Yeah.
in order to, the trumpet isn't just, I'm not going to say a saxophone or other reed-based like clarinet stuff is just blowing, but like the trumpet really isn't just blowing. It's
Yeah, you
like
got to
this, like,
hear those intervals. And what I mean, you only
yeah.
got 3 valves. It's not like
Hmm.
changing the keys and just getting to the next note. You got to do that with your breath and the
Yeah,
holding the amateur. I think that's the right word I'm looking for.
it's it's really daunting, and it's interesting, and it was quite a challenge, and it was suddenly opened up music in a different way to me. So I was glad to be exposed to it. That time period was sixth, seventh, and eighth grade. And in eighth grade was when I got my hands on a guitar, and my father started to teach me, in such a way that it wasn't so much where I was learning trumpet via, Mary Had a Little Lamb, etc.,
Right.
and then moving up to like Sounds of Suzer and fun stuff to play, etc. But that being said, with the guitar with my father, aside from him throwing a Mel Bay chord book my way, he also got me a Neil Young Decade chord book. Decade is this retrospective, a Neil Young album of his work in the 70s. And there's just a lot of, it was always around and on in my house when I was young. So I learned a lot of guitar by learning the songs out of that songbook and listening to that album. There's a lot of good stuff with like open voiced E minor sevenths and Ds. Need One the Damage Done. And just like hearing amazing song work, but also that was kind of how I started to learn my way through guitar.
Was it
But
tabbed
my thought,
out? Like, was it,
y-
or was it just
yeah,
straight chords?
it was definitely tabbed out. It
Nice.
was,
Okay.
well, it was, I've never, other than the reading that I learned to play trumpet, any of the learning that I did in terms of my guitar playing, and my journey that's been going now, I guess, almost 30 years in playing guitar. Aside from, I'd say post studies, meaning like the last 10 years, I decided I really should go back and try to open up different avenues by actually using different like I have I'm a magazine collector, so I have like Guitar Worlds going back like
Nice.
25 years, and they
Yeah,
all have really sound like little lessons in the back.
they do.
So like in the last like 10 years, I collected like this little scrapbook of all these lessons, just little like kind of pick me up tricks, and then also like I did a I got acquainted with finger picking via some watching some stuff on YouTube. You know, I mean, so there's different
Right.
methods that I've come to learn since then. But to dial it back, what happened to the trumpet was the question. It was such a good question. I didn't think it was directed for me. I got to tell you, Dave or Zig or whatever we're going to go with. I'm already happy to be this deep into the woods. I'm not even sure where I'm going. So I mean, what happened was the trumpet I put down in the name of the guitar in 8th grade. The guitar wound up in my hands. My father started to teach me. He taught me in such a way that I was starting to learn songs via that Neil Young book and some other songs. So I was kind of like on this breadcrumb trail to feeling like I can write songs. I wanted to use it as a tool right away. So I ran off with the guitar and left the trumpet where it was. I I've always toyed with the idea like I'm going to get one back in the mix. You know, I mean, as
Yeah.
time has progressed, you know, obviously I have guitars, I have basses, I have some keyboard type synth instruments around. You know, I mean, I feel comfortable on all of those, and I do a lot of sound stuff with my pedal board and stuff. But uh, circling back to trumpet, especially now that you brought it up, is something that I'm feeling like I would like to think about again. So thank you for doing some research and asking me about trumpet. That really goes back to the core of things for me. Um, yeah, and I'd like to go back there again at some point. It was quite a challenge to make that trumpet sing. It really is.
It
It's
is.
tough on the lips.
It
It is.
is. It's with guitar. Well, it's interesting that you always wanted to because you always saw yourself as a singer because trumpet is very much like the breathing techniques are kind of the same as far as singing and like but that lip armature thing is completely different and you're really hearing what note you're supposed to get to, you know what I mean? Like what's cool about guitar, you know, like here's my G, you know, every time I go to it it's going to be there, but when you're singing you like, did I hit that? I gotta listen back. And trumpets kind of
Yeah.
got some of that same mystique at first because you really got to gain the ear for it. So it makes more sense that guitar would be an opening door because I mean, especially if you're going through a Neil Young book, like, well, he does G minor and E a lot. What's going on? You know what I mean? Like, I can do that, and like that, you know, it's a little more of a reachable like. I don't want to say Neil Young's a reachable goal, but you know what I mean? Like, it's a little more reachable than maybe like I'm listening to a Miles Davis record and be like, write that. And you're like,
100%. I mean, Neil Young was much more of a mountain that could be climbed and one that I could make traction on right away to keep me really feeling like I'm getting somewhere, you know, because there's
yeah,
that challenge when you first pick up an instrument. Like I felt naturally like I could sing. And I did think during 6th and 7th grade, I did think, well, I'm getting this trumpet in my life because I'm working on my wind, because I'm going to be this great vocalist. So I was thinking that at the time, you know, and it's interesting that you say that. It really is. The trumpet is really something that is connected in a sense, or you know, like to a vocal type of instrument. But that being said, yeah, it's I don't know, it's really weird the path that we wind up taking, almost by accident, but all the while under the umbrella of knowing we'd like to create, and this is the this is the form within which we'd like to proceed. Like I knew
right.
music was going to be it. I wasn't sure what. You know, to this day I can dabble around if you left me alone in a studio and make a song that I could play, you know, all the parts of, I'm sure, if I had to or wanted to, and I feel nice about it later on. I mean, the collaborative part of it all is the real true joy. Every great thing that I've gotten the chance to do has been via the collaborative part of it all. So you know, I don't really yearn to go into a studio space and make something by myself, but I would say like the musicality that has kind of like you know, come via this, you know, nonstop experience of pushing myself out there into the public forum and not into my own personal journey of music nonstop. It's definitely it's grown over time, but I just always knew that, you know, that magical feeling I had of kind of release and of also safety that music gave me from a young age. I knew I was going to find my way somehow through it all. But yeah, the finding a scalable kind of mountain with the Neil stuff, definitely to keep me rolling and floating and through that learning process with a new instrument. as opposed to like, thinking of like, bitches brew,
Right.
like, I mean, and wow, I mean, so, yeah, I'm glad that I got to wade my way into the waters, and like off the back of that early experience of learning how to play guitar in '92. By '94, I had found some friends in the neighborhood and started to just be a singer in a band. So then
Okay.
I was just a singer, a screamer, shouter for a good 4 years, and that was a great experience because at the time I was at the age I was a couple months shy of my 16th birthday the first time we played L'Amour, and L'Amour is this. It's been closed now for a good amount of years, but it was a very legit rock club in Brooklyn, in the Bensonhurst area of Brooklyn, that had functioned from, I think, late '70s through the end of the '90s. And like everyone had played L'Amour, everyone passed through had played L'Amour, like Maiden, Kiss, Metallica, like Chili
Damn.
Peppers. I mean, all the, I mean, and back then when I was coming up, Brooklyn bands were like Biohazard and Life of Agony. They weren't like, I don't know what Brooklyn bands people think. I mean, the Brooklyn Explosion in like '01, people were think TV on the radio and yeah, yeah, yes. And of course
Yeah.
that is that. But like when I was a kid here growing up, it was a different thing. It was like Typo Negative. But anyway, I kind of,
Yeah.
I've
No.
circled around.
No, it's
Yeah, I've
all
circled
good.
around a bunch of questions, and I'm off on a tangent now. Why don't you rein me back in,
No, it's cool. Tangents are
please?
great. I live in a tangent.
Yeah, I get very tangential. You'll get a lot out of me by accident. All you have to do is kind of like tap me on the shoulder, and all of a sudden it's a half hour later. So please rein me back in, because I wound up talking about like kind of my first band experience, and then I was flashing back to the '90s in Brooklyn and what it was like, and I was explaining L'Amour, that like playing my first gigs at 15 at L'Amour, and then playing CBGBs by 16.
Yeah.
Like that was kind of like, that was a formative time, and I recently traced back. Like I could go through pretty much every year for the last 25 or 26 years where I at least played a handful of gigs. I mean, Cinema has been happening now for the last 13 and a half years. So I've had a steady, serious home. And those have been like
Right.
the real gist of everything, and the real like the culmination of so many things, because it's been me and my cousin playing together as the core of that. So like it's been about so much more than anything we could achieve. It's been about like, the therapy of making art in a collaborative sense with someone I love and respect, who I know is just as much thrown over the cliff with it as I am. Like he's just as committed as me. So that safety we feel in going full tilt with each other has been great. So I'm glad that I started this journey with the trumpet and the guitar in the beginning of the '90s when I was a wee one. But I'm even gladder that now I'm in my early 40s and I seriously chase and consider my art a very important part of my life. And that's not based around any kind of like commerce it brings in, or any kind of situation that needs to be justified to somebody. It's my sanity, and it's who I am for sure. So I'm
Right.
really proud to be talking decades later and talking to you on your show about my band, and eventually about the new album coming out, and maybe about other crazy things. So it's a treat. Music's a real gift.
Definitely. Well, and one, I think it's the speak on some of what you just said. I think it's important that it is done for you, and like, you know what I mean, like, cause so much of, and I'm sure you can speak way more in depthly on it than I can, but so much of like doing the band thing, right? There's, especially now, if you can be genretized, if we can put you on a bill that is like, okay, the jam bands are playing the night, you're a jam band, you fit in that, and Spotify's all hunky dory on, oh, this is a pop track with a umpteen beat tempo, we can put this on this playlist. Like everything is so like specific, so it can be placed and like marketed. The fact that like you've come to have your own art and this own unique sound that varies from thrash like punk to like free jazz, which I got more questions on in a bit, but like to find this common ground that is uniquely what you care about, and to find a homie, which ends up being your cousin, that will it's ride or die pretty much to help you like express that. Like I can't think of a better like a better definition of success.
Oh man, yeah, that, you know what? Thank you. And as you were saying it, I mean, that summation I have definitely made over the years, in just like the absolute gratitude I have for this experience, to have, like you said, made an absolute homie, and that homie is my cousin, and my cousin and I would have had a relationship regardless, but the one we
Right.
have now doesn't look like one that I have with anyone else. It's just a place of like, reliability and trust. And, I mean, about a year or two in, we started to keep like book on everything is 50-50. Every decision, every dollar, every come, every go. There isn't like, I think he'd want to do this. So I'll just, no, there's nothing. So we
Right.
dialed that in like within the first 2 years. And it's been, I mean, January to come, it'll be about 14 years. And
Damn.
I'm speaking only about the future because we already
Right.
have our next album is mixed and mastered. And the one after that, we're actually tracking right now. So, I mean, during this COVID freeze up, which has been its own, thing for all of us, we stayed active in our own way. For the first, 14 months, we didn't even see each other and couldn't practice. And that was quite a strain on everyone's, mental scenario. But there was so much at play that many things were, strained. But um, we kind of like went into that with a warmth, even though we had to slow down. We had a new album that we were ready to mix. We mixed it remotely. Then when we finally could play together again after a year and change passed, we went into the studio and tracked. So I mean, that's all based on like we've built this telepathic thing, my cousin and I. I mean,
Right.
it's so intrinsic to our life experience. It goes well beyond the idea of any kind of conventional trappings of fortune and fame and all that stuff. I mean, that's the stuff that he and I, as two kids from Brooklyn, like have been able to do and achieve. Like and run around and say, we know that we've been, to this point and that point and the other point, and we've done it. Like I mean. It's the thrill of that like,
Yeah.
I mean, that I really, really, really hold as the true reward. I mean, it's a therapy to us. It's an absolute huge therapeutic value to us. And when we shifted, it was, to be honest with you, 2013, 2014, we did a bunch of shows and touring with a reunited Black Flag, etc. Obviously for a band like us, which is a weird, loud, wacko band, we thrive in like packed basements and 150 cap clubs, to suddenly, jump up to doing huge rooms with Black Flag, not just 2 or 3 times, but an entire 50 shows in
Yeah.
2014 opening for them. It was mind-boggling, mind-blowing, and a beautiful, beautiful experience for us. But I think it was around that point when you'd think that maybe we suddenly started to think, oh, look at this, look at us,
Yeah.
like look at what we've gotten to. We were a band for 6 years at that point, so we've been a band longer since then than we've been to that point. So, but like when we got there, we started to on a daily basis realize like, this is never going to be about like, oh, we're somebody. This is always going to be about, oh, we need to be grateful for those around us and how whatever is happening. And like, there's this is being done like not for any kind of success, but for how it makes us feel sane. I mean, and it was around that time when we realized like, we're on this big tour. We might not ever be on a bigger tour, and everything is great. But the bottom line is it's going to end at one point, like, and life still has to be life. Like getting that big tour helped us to recognize a need for like there to be balance, because once you're out there, you see, oh, no matter what, even Black Flag or anybody, no one's on tour 12 months out of the year. Like it's, you have to have a full rounded experience. You
Yeah.
can't achieve your life value based on one facet of your life. So I think it took getting to a little bit of a bigger scale there for a minute, for us to recognize like what we're actually in it for. And that's why after that, it was like, oh, let's keep on doing everything that we want to, the craziest music possible. Let's not have any rules. God forbid we get another big tour one day, or we don't. A niche band like us, I mean, it's all good, but we surely we were like kind of motivated to appreciate it even more when that happened, rather than like get cocky about it. It was more about like, oh, we need to be really, really nice and humble and understand, like, this is a really lucky spot to be in. So I think we were lucky that we took it in that like kind of stride. And that's when
Right.
like this gratitude thing started like 6 or 7 years ago, where we were just grateful to have the band. That's all. Bottom
Right.
line,
Right.
wow, how lucky are we? We get to be best bros. We get to care about this thing, And when we do it, we feel the most like ourselves, like, and we're trying to find a way for it to not torture us when we don't, because part of being an artist is when you hear no. You hear
Yeah.
no 5 times before people wake up and have their coffee in the morning. I hear that I've
100%.
been rejected. I hear that my band isn't good enough. I hear that we won't be having you this time. I hear that before you open your coffee,
Yeah.
like before you start like pressing yes on the Keurig. You know what I mean? That's part of being an artist too. It's not always just like, well, let me tell the good show about playing House of Blues Anaheim when everybody was there. Like, it's not always that. It's once that, and it's 1,000 times you're not good enough. So,
Right.
to just, keep rolling and tumbling through that regardless is one thing, but to recognize, oh, I do it all because the yeses and the nos matter, because it makes me feel like I'm attaching some meaning and value in my life, because sometimes we could feel like, what is life?
Right.
We worry, and
Right.
if we don't put our own meaning and value into it, sometimes it could get a little dark. So it's felt really good to have that kind of like bond with my cousin, and it's over the art that we make, and we're like in it for the long haul. I mean, he and I are, growing up, we're our personal relationships outside the band with our, fiancés are becoming wives, things are becoming like
Right.
bigger and broader, but like, it's not like we're like saying like, so listen, it's all over. It's just like, okay, cool. Well, like, if we're both going to be getting married, like, maybe we won't be doing shows for 6 or 7 or 8 months. I mean, we'll figure out something after. We just know that, like, we both love to do the band, so it's here. And we're going to keep on tending to it, So that's
Right.
that's the real gift in it, making such a tight connection with my cousin Paul.
Now that definitely like the speak on that before I got some Black Flag questions, but speak on that. I think that one that's huge because when you play out, you can only play one place so many times, right? So to have that downtime probably is better for that. You know what I mean? As far as like, I mean, you guys road dog hard. You guys tour like pretty extensively. Like your tour dates are pretty intense, but so having that downtime and being able to balance it and know that no matter what, in like 6 months or 3 months, this is still going to be important. I think that's huge, and that's not easy to find. And just like it's amazing that one that you found it within your own family, because you guys are like what 10 years, 9 years apart, something.
Yeah, we're basically just about almost 10. It's like 9 and change.
Okay, nine and change. Was there
No,
like
actually, no. It's actually no. I'm yeah. He's born 88. I'm born 78. So it's actually 10 on the
oh,
money.
okay, nice on
Yeah.
that. So like I guess probably growing up there wasn't that clear connection that we're gonna do something right away. You know what I mean? That just because of that like that gap. You know what I mean? Like two different spots of life. But what brought you guys together was your uncle, right? In making his record.
Yeah, man. And you're right. There definitely was. I mean, with the 10-year difference, I was 10 when Paul was born. I
Right,
mean,
right.
so I'm not thinking like, there's my sticks. Like I'm not thinking get him a bass drum. Like I mean,
Yeah, no,
I
there's
mean,
no way. There's no.
yeah, absolutely not. I mean, recently, I mean, Paul uncovered a photo. I mean, eventually, if there's some mega box set 1,000 years from now, maybe something like this would make its way to the light of day. But this is this is a family private photo, but it's hilarious. It's like my uncle, which is his dad, Paul, and my aunt, Maureen, which is his mom, holding Paul, freshly like, 6 months old. And there I am, like 10 years old. And the difference is like the size of like, you know, a human and a little kind of like
Yeah,
bunny or like a little rabbit, or like an, it's just like, it's crazy to
that
think, I
is.
mean, and I marvel at the results all these years later, but yeah, there wasn't a clear cut, like this is going to be, but it was the connection via my uncle. Essentially, this is kind of an interesting little story to really tie into the family thing of it. You see, my dad, who was Evan Gold Sr.,
Mhm.
and Paul's dad, who's Paul Claro Sr., essentially, they were best friends in the 70s. And that's how my dad met my mom, who's Paul's
Okay.
dad's mom. I don't know if I'm
Right.
totally confusing you.
No, I'm following you.
But
I'm following you.
okay, so there was, I go by Ev, but it's short for Evan. There was an Evan Gold and Paul Claro in the 70s, like making music in a basement somewhere,
That's
kind of
yeah.
like preceding this entirely, accidentally, Paul Claro introduced that Evan Gold to his sister, and like, boom, I happened by accident in '78, and then Paul comes along 10 years later in '88. So it is kind of odd that, our parents were friends, and they were friends in the sense that they were playing in a band together as kids, and that's how like they kind of, that relationship developed where I came along. So that's one little family caveat thing. But yeah, and to further explain my uncle's tie-in. So, all those years later, my uncle was always a musician. He remained a musician, as did my dad, etc. So it was, my uncle had decided to finally like go to a studio and make a recording of some songs that he had. He just wanted, he didn't have like some aspiration to, like for anything other than like, I've been writing songs for a long time, I've not gone to a studio. He spoke to me because I had played in bands, like I was just talking to you about playing, Lemoore and CBGBs in the 90s. I mean, by the mid-aughts, maybe at that point I wasn't in an active band at that moment, but like if my uncle was thinking of going to a studio, he like would bell me up, and, he'd and say, Ev, do you know somebody, or would you want to come play on this or that? So when he belled me up and asked me about that, it seemed totally commonplace. I didn't realize that, that Paul, his son, was going to come to play. Now I had seen Paul played. Paul played his high school. His high school had like a serious, legit like jazz marching band. He was like lead drums. They actually went to Japan on on this exchange trip. It was a highlight of his young music career. I think he was kind of on the fence as to whether he was going to go to music school for college or otherwise. Coming off the back of that experience in high school, he went otherwise rather than music school. But if you eventually have Paul on, you could always talk to him about that. But the point is, I had seen like the holiday before, like the tape of that jazz band doing their main recital before they were going to Japan, but like the main thing, and saw Paul playing with a huge ensemble where like he's leading this orchestra, and they are bouncing. They sound great. They're doing everything sounds good because like he's drumming in the middle of this percussion section. So I knew Paul was talented, undoubtedly, but when my uncle called me and said he was going to record some songs, it didn't connect to me. Oh, I'm going to go and Paul's going to go and we're going to play.
Right.
But that's what came to be. It was late '07, and Paul and I started playing together officially in '08. I mean, we went to this little studio, we got together, we played, and, within the afternoon, Paul and I definitely just felt a connection for sure. Like we were just adding accents to little parts of my uncle's song, which we had only just heard for the first time or two and then spent a few minutes with. We weren't looking to change his song. We were just trying to back him up.
Right.
To add some rhythm guitar, add some, slight drums, go with our, with the family, kind of read each other a bit, etc. But Paul and I, right out of the gate, were, laying in these accents that were as if we had been playing together normally. So I felt something, he felt something, and then maybe a month or two later, I was in a position where, playing music was, of the essence to me, and the people I was playing with were making some life changes, and we weren't going to play together anymore. And I was just trying to find finding a drummer. I mean, it's just like, a good drummer is great for a band. Makes a
Yeah, the kind of
makes a
clutch.
clutch. Yeah, a good drummer makes like a so-so band sound really good.
For
You
sure.
know what I
For
mean? Like,
sure.
yeah, a great drummer can make almost anything work. I mean, and then there's also a lot of drummers, that aren't that, but they could also play, and that's fine.
Right.
But I mean,
It fills in the gap, but
yeah, but so a month or two after recording with my uncle, when I knew, I knew playing with Paul felt good, but still I was looking at it from like he's 10 years younger.
yeah.
I mean, there's just, we hadn't really discussed anything, but I was going through like Craigslist trying to meet up with bass players, drummers, and it was just like a perpetual hole of not so good encounters. And then one night I was trying to meet this bass player who didn't meet up with me, and Paul had a gig with his band at the time. They were like a piano, saxophone, drum trio.
Was it like a
Playing
jazz
like,
band? Was it like a
yeah, like more like jazz, but with a pop rock kind of like flavor. Like
huh?
the piano player sang, so it was somewhere in like a piano-led, almost like theatrical jazzy kind of thing. I mean, but so I went, and not that the other members of the band were able to do their thing, but I was like blown away by seeing Paul in his element, like, in this band that he was in, where like he's helping to obviously arrange and write these songs, which, I mean, I'm of the musical, kind of, I'm of the musical inclination that whether or not that's the style of music per se that I listen to. First of all, I listen to so many different styles that I just like, it's either good to me or it's not so good, but I'm
Right,
still trying to be
right.
open-minded. But so the point is, whether or not like, was the musical style or not, I was knocked over by what they were doing, and it was what Paul was doing that really was speaking to me. And I thought then, ooh, it went from suddenly, oh, my cousin plays, to like, if I could play in a band with him, I'd be in good shape, like,
Right,
so
right, right.
then it was kind of like, okay, well, I'm 10 years older than him. I've been playing in bands on and off. He's known since as early as he could remember, like he plays, he wants to play. Let's conversate. And as soon as we talked about it, we were both like salivating at the idea, like, I mean,
Right.
and he had wanted to do it, and I didn't realize he had wanted to, like, and it opened me up in such a way, like, oh wow, he wants to play with me. I feel validated. I feel so nice about that. Holy crap. So we started off on this really nice, like, footing. And because I've been playing on and off in bands, like, I had some emails at clubs and, like, to get gigs, and we just started rolling right out of the gate as
Nice.
quickly as we could. But
Now with
yeah,
the sorry
go
to
ahead. Yeah. So no, please. No, I was done. Finish line next.
no. No, it's awesome. Like, did I bet just with that time, that age gap, and like you playing out, like you kind of were showing him, and it was possible. You know what I mean? Just being in the family, being like, I have a cousin who plays. I can do this somehow. Did he ever bring that up in conversation? Like when I saw
Yeah,
you guys do blank, that what I mean, that had like I don't have that much music in my family, but had there been more of, I'd been like, oh shit, it's possible. If my
I
cousin,
definitely, I mean, I can't really do the story proper justice. He would have to tell it, but there was definitely a part of the story that he told me in previous years before we ever even played together. There was a demo that I had made, like, it's in like 2003. It was like in between bands, in between whatever. I went into a studio, recorded a couple of songs. Um, to condense it down, I mean, obviously, I must have given a copy to my uncle, his dad, and whoever else I know and love, and spreading it around. But when Paul was, kind of putting together, playing drums, playing in his house, kind of like taking lessons, learning, etc., he had like thrown into the mix one or two of the songs from that demo, and like
ah,
really
sick.
liked those two
Yeah,
songs, and like, and thought to play them with me one day would be cool. So like when he, like in the first year or two during like one of our first tours where we had to drive really far, and we thought, well, this will be nothing. And then you're driving for a long time for the first time, and you have no experience with it. You're like, wow, this feels like forever. But it doesn't so much, because we're having our first big, long, deep conversations. I didn't know it was going to be like this. And all of a
yeah,
sudden, it turns into, by years later, we can do a 6-hour drive with no radio, not even trying. And it's not like we'll be talking the whole time because we're best
right.
friends. It's just such an easy rhythm because we're so comfortable with each other. But those first drives, when it was like, let's go play the Midpoint Music Festival in Cincinnati in September of 2008. We've never done a show outside of Brooklyn, and we don't know how to book a tour there, but we'll do a one-off. Cincinnati's
Right.
13 hours. Okay.
That's
And it's
fine.
just like, yeah, and we did it. But like maybe it was on that trip, but maybe it was then. It was one of those kind of like first kind of deep ones, where the bonding really comes along in a big way, where he told me that story, and it knocked me into next week. Like, when you make art, when you make music, no matter what level you're at, unless, I mean, obviously if you're talking to somebody who's world renowned, like
Right.
name renowned, it's got to be different. But I think almost any other artist who's not at that level has this level of feeling like they're screaming in a hallway that no one else is in. They are screaming at the void. No one knows that they are alive. They did everything that they could to put a piece of art into the world that represented something, and no one knows. No, I'm sorry. I've worked really hard to push into the public forum the stuff I've done, and still you
Yeah.
come away thinking, does anyone know? Does anyone care? Does anyone care? Does anyone know? So in those small, real moments, when your cousin turns around and says to you, 10 years ago, when you didn't even know it, there was this, I would play your tape over and over and play drums to it. Suddenly, like, you're crying,
Right.
and life has a meaning, and I'm thrilled to be there and be participating, So, I mean, that's the kind of like, magical little bits. And that's why it's like at the end of our sets, I mean, like what we've always done customarily is we wind up like hugging it out at the very end. Like we crash land the set the way we do when we play live. There's a lot of noise, a lot of insanity. It comes to a halt, and then as I'm turning things off, you know, if people are deciding to clap or not, as we do one long set, we don't stop in between songs for clapping. It's a long concurrent thing where we do jams to segue from song into song.
Right,
But the point
right.
is, we then hug at the end, you know, and then at the end of the night, we're loading out the gear. When we say goodbye, we say, "Hey, man, I love you." Like, I don't know too many other bands that
No.
like that's their finale, and then behind the scenes, they actually say, "Hey, I love you, man. I'll talk to you tomorrow," and they send a good morning text the next day. You know, that's the kind of stuff that happened from like the bonding that's happened of doing it with him, and
Right.
hearing like, "Hey, I had some sort of value in, you know, by that demo tape I made to his young ears at a formative time that inspired him, and he's, in my opinion, extremely, extremely mind-bogglingly talented on the kit. So to think that I could touch somebody who's already naturally talented to make them even feel motivated to do anything more, boom, I did my job as a musician right there with just my cousin. And then, you know, the world gets to hear my cousin play drums a little more because we play in a band together, and I'm running around trying to get us involved with whatever we can get involved
Right.
with, and we work really hard together at it.
It's interesting because like music itself, the whole it move right. The idea is like it moves people, it makes people dance, and like as an artist, you want your work to move people, maybe not in the physical way, but the maybe transcendental way of like having a new form of thought. And when you're a musician and you learn that you've inspired somebody, like especially like kind of look at they touch on the Black Flag thing, like the whole DIY punk ethos, right? Like of doing it yourself and being inspired because they did it, and to know that it hit home that hard, right? And like there is no, like you were saying, I can't imagine a better like there's no higher reward than that, than because I 100% agree with it, screaming in the void. Like so much of doing music is just like, here it is, 2 likes, nice, one more than last time, you know what I mean? Like, and like it starts
Yes.
it starts to
That's
become
great. That's great. Sorry.
this thing where you have to like justify it for yourself and not be egotistical about it. You know what I mean? Because it's easy enough to keep feeding your own loop, and then it's completely impure. So to find the balance of doing it right like that is a not an easy task. But as soon as there's one nibble of someone saying, "Hey, what you do made me feel like good about thinking about playing music," you know what I mean? Even a little thing like that, and then when it hits home as much as it did with your cousin, like that's badass. That's super badass. So, and the kind of turn that into a question. When you went to Cincinnati, how do you even hear about that fest? That's a long drive from Brooklyn. Like,
Yeah.
was it something you were aware of? And like,
Well, I mean, the deal was in all the bands I played in before I started playing with Paul, which is like starting from 1994 all the way through 2007.
what type of what
Actually,
type of music was that? Was it like punk? Was it hardcore?
the
Was
bands
it
that I played in, I would definitely say were, you know, like heavy, not metal, like heavy to hard rock in the 90s, like you know, like the 90s band was like heavy to hard alternative or rock kind of, and then it turned into, yeah, I mean, kind of like nothing that was ever as experimental or jazzy or loud or intense. I think all of the extremes were never explored in any of the bands that I played in before. Like
mm,
you can hear the insanity that comes through in Cinema, but aside from maybe when I was a straight vocalist for my first band and I incorporated a lot of different screaming and different like breathy, weird talking and stuff that I was experimenting with at the time, that was fairly aggressive, you know. But I would say that, you know, the bands were more in the realm of like, you know, indie rock, alternative rock,
okay,
you know, with punk leanings, you know, like, I mean, Fugazi was basically like a Bible to me. Not that I ever played in a band that sounded like Fugazi, but just the ethos of like, you can get
right,
heavy without necessarily being crushingly heavy. Like, as long as like you're smart and you're tight and you're aware of dynamic and like you follow like song with sensibility. So, but the thing was, I think I really, 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 at the core of it, I always wanted to be just in totally uninhibited. And the thing is, when you play in bands, for the most part, you know, I mean, no, not many people want to have like everybody in band going crazy and like, and people want like, you know, it's hard to explain what I'm saying. Like, no one wants, like a nonstop doodler doodling and doodling
Right.
and doodling away on their instrument. And I'm not saying that that's in it by any means what we do, but like what we did in the early goings, I think, was we didn't limit each other in terms of like being as free as each other would want to explore, as far as we want to go with like playing it crazy, playing it wacko, overplaying it, underplaying it, doing whatever we want. It's just the two of us, I mean, and
Yeah.
then we tried to like find a way to use that limitation as an advantage and do things that really worked for the two of us. But we had to kind of like do it by trial and error, I think, in the beginning. But now that's when Paul and I started playing, it really kind of like became just open, very open, and kind of, I guess I'd like to say, closer to what I always wanted to do. But I think any previous music I made was more, slightly more controlled and more,
Okay.
like I don't want to say conventional, but I mean, yeah, that's not a bad word. I mean, there's more like song based, less absolutely unhinged insanity, I'd say. Like, I mean, somewhere with Paul and I, because from early on we didn't even realize it was screaming, it was shouting therapy at first. We didn't even realize that. It was just we could only make this insane sound together. That's what kind of happened. Like, I think when we got together at first, if you listen to the earliest cinema stuff, you'll hear more, I believe, more of a tuneful, more of a, song-based, and a little closer to rock. If you listen to Manic Children and the Slow Aggression, our album from 2012, which we recorded at Inner Ear down in Arlington, Virginia, with Don Zientara, who
Yeah.
is a great esteemed recordist who's done like everything Discord
Fugazi.
put out. And
Yeah.
exactly, I mean, so we were very fortunate in that occurrence. We also recorded with him again in 2018 for some Record Store Day stuff. But to get back to the point, if you go back to that, that's like our second album. That is, even as opposed to the following album and the one after that, like you can hear a jump to a little bit more unhinged by the following album. It was around, we did after that, after Manic Children and Soul Aggression, we got asked to do a cover from a song from the year 1993, any one that we wanted, because it was 2013. It was a 20-year anniversary comp this New Jersey label was putting out, and we chose 50 Foot Queenie, the PJ Harvey song, which had come out on I guess Dry in 1993, I think is the name of the album. But the point being, when we went in and cut 50 Foot Queenie, it was like a year and change after we did that Manic Children album, and was like we had done like as many shows as possible. We were saying yes to every show, every drive, everything. Because I'm going to circle back around to that Cincinnati question, but we were saying yes to everything. And then when we went and did Queenie, we were this like new kind of beast. So if you
Right.
listen to 50 Foot Queenie, we kind of went through a doorway on 50 Foot Queenie where we became heavier, unhinged, and the vocals just became absolutely like a madman. And that kind of then opened the door further to further heavy, intense, wacko punk, and then how far can we take it? Let's take it even further. Let's get wind involved. Let's get horns involved. Let's get improv involved, and we kind of come closer to where we are now. But to get back to that Cincinnati thing, what happened was I said all that about the previous bands, but the main point about the previous bands is none of them had played shows beyond like the border of New York
Mm.
State, and I always. I mean, I had read Get in the Van in 1995, and I just this morning took it off my shelf
Yeah.
again, and I marveled. I was happy at the fact that I was doing an interview with you today, and actually a few hours ago I had another interview scheduled with a different outlet. And it's all in promotion of a new album that I have coming out with my band, etc., which we'll get to. And the point is, I was really happy to be me today and recognize that. So I was kind of like
Hell
spending
yeah.
some time with the
Yeah.
artifacts around the house that kind of meant something to me. And I hadn't touched Get in the Van in a while, and I grabbed it off the shelf. And I just looked at the forward real quick, which is its own kind of plain, poignant thing, but he kind of dedicates it to all the bands who've been through it, etc. But then I start reading it, and I get to like the second or third page, and I see, pictures of Ginn and the Black Flag and Rollins and stuff. And when I know like the 17-year-old version of me read this thinking like this is like a key to the map of the world,
Right.
like this is how you do a band, and knowing that then the 35-year-old version he wound up on tour with Black Flag, that's like being a
That's
Mets fan and getting drafted to play on the Mets. That's like
Yeah.
being a it's like that's an amazing thing. But the thing is kind of this morning I was spending some time, looking at Get in the Van and enjoying it, and it was making me remember that before I ever played with Paul, I played in a number of bands, but I dreamed of a band that would say, okay, not necessarily, screw it all, quit everything today, let's do it, even though that's kind of what I dreamed of. But I dreamed of a band, yeah, that would get in the van and go travel around and just have the adventure of touring. I hadn't done that. I'd played locally, and that was that. That was part of what the evolution of my late 20s into my 30s. And I was married in my 20s to the wrong person, and it came down to different goals. And one of my
Right.
main arguments from my side of why I couldn't continue was like, I need to play music in all 50 states. Like, you don't understand that, because you think I want to be like the most famous person in the world, and sure, that would be nice if a lot of people heard about it, but I need to go out there and do this. Like, you need to start a family, and I don't. Like, that was just like a change in my late 20s when I got divorced and then started playing in the band with Paul like 6 months later. But the point is this: I was yearning to go to get out there, and Paul matched that energy with me right off the bat, and we agreed, okay, well, Black Flag is our guide. That's what we're going to try to be. Like that, we're going to book shows, we're going to do whatever we have to do, we're going to play everywhere. So we were on the lookout early on in 2008 for anything that was out of town. We were always booking like a New York and a Brooklyn show to like double book a month. So it's like we had
Right.
the illusion of playing as many shows as possible. We needed to go. We needed to get out of town. So in the argo of the times, all those like CMG Music Marathon and North by Northeast, and South by Southwest, which obviously became a corporate entity and still stands to this day. But I just mean like back in 05, 06, like, really the, music like festival things were just like really kind of prevalent, and small bands would try to get on them. 07, 08, 09, 10, all the way through into the teens, until, those bigger ones like South by Southwest became corporatized and
Yeah.
humongous. And obviously they're there. And like, Little Baby Nas One and the Strokes, and everybody plays it, or whoever it is, but the point is, I had my eyes peeled, as from the get-go with the band. I've kind of been like the searcher, or the, like the, quote unquote, like the manager, or whatever you want to call it. Like, I'm the one who's sniffing things out, connecting dots, sending emails, for the most part, like the hound on the trail. So that started early, where I didn't know what trail was what, and I was
Right.
willing to go anywhere. And my cousin, who was 10 years younger than me, I was 29, he was 19. He's like, I'm ready, let's go. So we got like our first gig out of town at Maxwell's in Jersey, in Hoboken. So like that was like
Nice.
barely,
Okay.
it's like, and
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
not even really out of town, but it's like
It's
it is out
out
of
enough.
town.
Yeah.
And it's like Maxwell's, like, hey,
That's
everyone's played
epic.
there.
Yeah.
Holy cow, it's epic. So we were thrilled about that. And we got so hot about that then we had submitted to do CMJ that year in New York, because you used to have to like submit through like a press kit or whatever. And we got an okay for it, which we were really happy about. But at the same time we submitted, we were thinking we're going to do a festival every month. We didn't know what we were thinking. We had seen,
Right.
like, as we were submitting for CMJ, another ad for this Cincinnati festival. And I had, in my heart of hearts and in my soul of souls, this dream, because of WKRP in Cincinnati when I was a child. I dreamt that one day I'd be in a rock band on tour, and I'd play Cincinnati, and I would like sing the theme song, that baby, if you ever wondered whatever became of me, I'm living on the air in Cincinnati,
Nice.
WKRP. I always wanted to say that on stage in between songs in Cincinnati and a tour stop. I was thinking that from the time I was a child. So when there was a Cincinnati possibility, we submitted, not thinking, Cincinnati's 13 hours away. We've only played outside the city once, and it's Jersey. Like, how do we even do this? Do we book other shows? And boom, we got accepted. Oh, wow. And then the ego rush and the good feeling, and we can't wait to do it. So you stop worrying about the fact that you don't know what the hell you're doing. And you just like literally plop into the pool and try to doggy paddle. And that's how we wound up doing a one-off for that Midpoint Music Festival, which was a great show, and it opened the door in that we had then a contact to book there and Southgate House in Kentucky, which is right over the bridge over there. You got your Skyline Chili, you got your Cincinnati and Kentucky right back to back with each other. I
Right.
mean, it's beautiful. So the point is, it was us, kind of like blindly throwing ourselves forward into the insanity. That's how we did that Cincinnati quote unquote tour / one-off early on, because we had to do like an out of town show every month. That was the beginning. That was September 08.
Okay. Yeah. That's well. What's cool, like it's so to get that out of town gig. As soon as you meet that person, now you're not just an email. Now you're not just like a maybe now a Facebook message. You have a connection with someone, which makes that touring possible.
Yeah, that's what happened. Well, what we did was we did that in September in Cincinnati, and it was like, oh wow, this is great. And then in January, we were going to be coming up on our 1-year band anniversary, and we planned a legit like 8 shows and 8 days tour down to Southgate House in Kentucky, which was going to be, the stop right after Cincinnati. The point was we were going back to Cincinnati because like,
Yeah.
oh, we got a spot, we got a connection,
We
they
know
like us
somebody.
there. We
Yeah.
need to go back again. So we did a tour that routed us down. It was January 2009. It was our 1-year anniversary, and we went in freezing January, not even like worrying about that. Like at the time, we didn't have a van yet. We had a 4-door Mazda Millennia.
Damn.
Okay. It was
Yeah. That's a
nicknamed
tight
Darryl
fit.
because, yeah, it was nicknamed Darryl because it came with a strawberry air freshener when Paul bought it, and we're big Met fans. So we went down there in Darryl, the Mazda Millennia, because we're an economically
Jamicano.
fitting. Yeah, we jam a Kano because we're a duo and we have everything on our lap in this Mazda. It was, the Mazda was the tour vehicle at first, but the whole point is we went ahead forward with our first actual like leave home Monday, come back the next Monday, do shows every night. Because of that Cincinnati experience in September and the following January 2009, we did a tour all the way down there, which made us play like DC and Virginia and like deeper into New Jersey and, ultimately Cincinnati again and Kentucky, all those for the first time, and Philly. And like that was like that burst the bubble. And in 2009, that year, we decided we were going to go insane, and we wound up playing 100 shows that year.
That's epic.
Yeah, it was. When it comes down to it, it's basically, now I'm just narrating stupid math, but my buddy said it to me at the time, like, that's like a show every 3.5 days, but it really kind of is. And it was, the thing is that like it was our own elective decision to be insane. Like we said yes to everything, and we made every weekend. I tell you, there was a venue called Plaza Bowl, a bowling alley in Richmond, Virginia. Richmond, Virginia is solid 6 hours and 15 minutes from Brooklyn. If you were to play this once in a career, maybe as a tour stop, maybe one time, it would probably be enough times. We played Plaza Bowl in 2009 like 4 times. Like we did this like, we went up and down this figure 8 because we made friends in those in Virginia and in DC, like all those ones I just mentioned, basically from here down to Kentucky. We did this like figure 8 thing over and over, and then we were throwing ourselves up into New England also over and over. And
that's what it's all about. That's what it's all about.
It was a great learning experience. Yeah, that was what it was all about. And to be honest with you, now that it's evolved and it's different, I definitely look at some of those times as some of my favorite times. When they're happening, you don't say, "Oh wow, this could be the favorite time." You just think, what the hell am I doing? But, what you're doing is you're going out and meeting life in the moment, So, yeah, it's been really a lot of fun chasing the sound everywhere.
That's beautiful. And that's the capital. You don't make money, you make friends. And like, it's amazing to have that drive to do it. And it's amazing. Like, I agree 100% with what you said there with looking back. You're like, that was rad. Even though we were out of gas and mostly hungry, that was really dope. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, but you're driving on ambition and like, but the jump into like, so touring with Greg Ginn now, like from reading, get in the van, which is Rollins' perspective, but like, man, to like, what was he like? Cause like, did he, before you guys got that gig, cause he was like repping one of your shirts on a tour, right? Like he was aware of you guys before.
Yeah, to flesh it out a little bit more and not turn it into an entire new episode. But we wound up. It was that year 2009 that I was just talking about, where we literally toured everywhere, nonstop, everywhere, nonstop. Where we met a band when we were on tour in DC, and they had done a split with Greg's new band at the time, like a split 45. That they released on their little label. It wasn't on SST, but like I hadn't even realized Greg was out and functioning and running around. And Greg was basically doing at the time he had a like fish-like jam band called Greg Ginn and the Taylor Texas Corrugators. That's what Greg's band was at the time. So now I'm talking back to 2009. So when I talked to this guy at the show, and he's like, "Yeah, well, we're gonna be playing a show with Greg in the summer," and I was like, my mind was just blown. Like you said, like you said, tracing back to what I said of reading Get in the Van, which obviously is Rollins'
Yeah.
perspective, and we know that, they have differences and all this stuff, but this isn't, their podcast, this is mine. Point is,
Oh, yeah.
whoa, 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 wow. Never in a million years thought I would even, get a chance to see a Greg Ginn solo show, let alone my band open some shows for his band then. So it started with that.
Got it.
A friend of mine said, hey, he's on MySpace. And this was in fall of '09. And I'm like,
Right.
MySpace was still a
Yeah.
thing. So I remember searching for him. And at the time, I found this profile that just had a cat as the profile picture. And I thought, it says Greg Ginn, but it's just a cat. Like, I guess I'm going to say, hi, I'm that guy's friend. He said he was going to say that I was going to send you a message, blah, blah, blah. So it started like that, me sending a blind message to a MySpace page that I wasn't quite sure was Greg. And then when Greg actually wrote back and clicked on our link and was receptive, and saw that, like, we weren't, I mean, at the time in 2010, or 2009, it had been years since he had done anything Black Flag related.
Right.
So, it wasn't, because in coming and getting into his world, I did come to see people would constantly, come to him about Black Flag this, Black Flag that. I think it would sometimes turn him off before he ultimately did those reunions. But we weren't coming from some kind of angle. We were just like, hey, we're a band that tours a ton. We're so inspired by this touring that you've done over the years. Like, you blazed this trail that, like, we're out here doing blah, blah, blah. And he wrote back, and it was nice. And he said, hey, and, in a few months, I'm going to be in your area. If you guys want to do 2 or 3 shows with us, I'm
That's
going to have
sick.
my booking agent get in touch. And at the
Yeah.
time, because it was, such a regular, when Greg played solo, it's, a 300 cap room or less, sometimes a
Right.
100 cap bar, it was, it's like, it's not, it's just for the avid music lover, this guy's an icon, this is important. But like for the average music lover, some don't know
Who's
who's who.
Yeah, yeah.
If they think Black Flag, they only think Henry Rollins. Like,
Right.
if they think, like, people don't recognize. So it's, at the time, it was from a very normal, innocent, organic space that it grew from. So when we turned around, and in 2010, we did like 5 shows with his jam band opening for them, and we were, so weird and different and odd, but both bands being unique, it worked, and we became really friendly right away. It was just very surprising, and it was a nice little rub at the time. We thought, holy cow, we're a band for a couple of years. We've done some shows with Greg Ginn. Like, wow, this is cool. And
Yeah.
it became just this natural, organic, I'm going to definitely say, a friendship, that just for the next year. And then the next year, there was about 2 or 3 years there before there was any Black Flag reunion, or any talk about it, where us, Cinema, and Greg, and whatever solo act he had going at the time, we did shows. I mean, we did shows with him in the spring of 2010. We did shows with him in the summer and in the fall, August and November of 2011. We went and did shows with him in February of 2012. We also did a recording session at SST with
No
Greg sitting
shit.
in as our bassist.
Sick.
Yeah, and that's he has all those recordings. I would love to see what eventually happens with it. We spent a full day, and then I spent like 3 hours that night doing all these crazy improv vocals. It was one of my genuinely greatest experiences of my life. But there is an untapped 90 minutes worth of music that's recorded down there. So, Greg, if you're hearing this, put your ear close to the radio if you're listening through some old type receiver, and understand that music should come out, man. We should talk. But anyway, point being, so there I go tracing the way. In February of 2012, we did more shows with him, and then we recorded stuff. And then in July of 2012, when we put out that Manic Children and the Slow Aggression album I just mentioned, we did a 2-week tour with him up here in the Northeast. And after that, where he ultimately was, he culminated with some shows in Manhattan. And then like a few months passed, and all of a sudden, in early 13, he got in touch saying he was doing a Black Flag reunion. And I thought,
Damn.
oh, wow.
Sick.
You know,
I'll come see
in the
that.
least, yeah, in the least, I'm going to get to be like maybe guest list to see a Black Flag reunion. That was my
Right.
first thinking. I'm going to be straight with you. I wasn't like, I'm the great me from the great my band, so of course I'd be involved. It was just like, holy crap, Greg, that's so cool. This sounds like it's out of my world in magnitude. I guess that maybe I won't have to pay for a ticket. Then it was like,
Yeah.
well, I'd love to, give you guys the, the shot to open up a handful of shows. You could
Hell
do
yeah.
like 1
Yeah.
or 2 in Chicago, and do 2 in Brooklyn, and maybe 1 in Philly. And we were just like, oh my God, like shaking, oh my God, like we're a band who plays basements and small clubs, and like all of a sudden, like these are going to be 3,000 cap shows. These are going to be like sell all the merch you have in one night kind of shows, if the crowd likes you or not, but
Right.
depending. But I'm just saying, like for us, like kind of a movement for us. So that was the organic way. And Greg had taken a couple of shirts off of us and wore them all around on tour, which kind of preceded us in a lot of places, which was this crazy throwback to me of like when, like, I mean, of course, this in no way relates in any way other than in my mind and in my little fantasy world. But when I was a little kid, I remember finding out who Daniel Johnston was
Right. From
because
Kurt
Kurt
Cobain.
Cobain wore a
Yeah.
T-shirt at a VMA, a Video Music
Yeah.
Awards in 1992. I was watching that. That was a great VMAs. Guns N' Roses closed with November Rain. Elton John played it with them. There was some kind of like big duel between Guns N' Roses and Nirvana. It was an interesting time in music. But the point is, not to make some analogy that's too insane, but like when Greg is being seen with our band's shirt on, and I have people I don't know sending me. You talk about the wow when someone tells you that they actually maybe like what you do or what you did helped them, like we talked about before, in
Yeah.
some little way to want to play more or anything. But talk about the mind blow through the room when someone sends you a screenshot of like one of the most iconic guitar players of all time, one of the most important punk rock people of all
Pioneers.
time, playing a huge gig wearing your band shirt, and like
Yeah.
you're someone got this sent to them from someone they know who you don't know.
Right.
Like, and for a second you feel like we got to be doing something right. Like we got to be able to stop and be proud. Like it's this weird thing. Like accountability is a big part of life. I find as I've become an adult. Like the moves I make, the actions that I perform, the way I interact with others is I like to keep an accountability for it. They're my actions. I want to stay whole with stuff. So I recognize what I do when I need to stop and maybe apologize, or when I need to stop and kind of be glad for how I treated a situation. I try to acknowledge that. I
Definitely.
try to live.
Yeah.
I mean, it's it's oh God, I was just
That.
if you want to cut in for a second, I was
No,
just
it's
making like I was just on my way to this
to
point,
cap in the
and then
point. I give it. It's
yeah, like
interesting
I kind
because
of tangentially went. I was getting spiritual there for a second, and I tangentially kind of fumbled at the goal line.
it's all, but it makes sense because like, well, it's acknowledging that you are doing something right by being. Yeah, what if I can predict where you're going to go by being pure and just doing it for the love of the music and the love of being creative in your own way. That another person who thrived on doing that and recognized that you recognized them for that, recognized you with that, and like,
Yeah,
so like
it's like
taking the responsibility, not but um, claiming your actions you took with that, and like because
yeah,
it,
like I'm sorry. Yeah, the accountability that I try to take, like I was saying, and thank you for leading me back in. And you were getting very predictive. You were getting predictive with your text there. But the accountability that I try to take in my everyday actions, where I recognize what I do, like. But as an artist, I'm not supposed to recognize that, like, I've actually gotten a chance to do that as well. Where some icon had my band shirt, like in my darkest moments, like it's weird. Like I won't flash on like a victory like that. You'll flash on the
right,
darker things, but like I in trying to like observe my life with more of a clear lens and living in the now and having accountability, it's made me find that regardless of the fact of whether or not I have some mansion on a hill in Beverly Hills and I get royalty checks or whatever I thought was stardom when I was a little kid, regardless of any of that, like I have to sit in absolute joy at the things that we've gotten to do. I mean, case in point, when we're talking about the genesis of how I got to know Greg Ginn or did shows with Greg Ginn, like it's wild to me, the kid who was reading Get in the Van, it's wild to me, the kid who was listening to Damaged and being like, wow, the thing that really is out of the lines the most is the guitar. What's up with this guitar player? Holy cow, he writes all the songs. He's the guy who started this label. And then, to be, face to face,
right,
on the blow, with the blowhole, on the whale, out in the water,
yeah,
like Costanza when he's a marine biologist, when he's getting the golf ball out in Seinfeld. I mean, to be out and with the beast. I mean, holy cow. It's great to get a chance to talk about it a little, and it's great to acknowledge it because I mean, it's being an artist is this torturous scenario where I circle back to that. You wonder, does it matter? Did any
right,
of it matter? But then I
right,
recognize I'm saying that while I'm on the phone with you, and you're helping me to recognize in this moment that it all matters, you know? So it's this constant mirrored to mirror to mirror image that we're
Right.
going through, I think, where when I lost myself tangentially, you started getting into a little predictive talk there that was getting me right back online, which I appreciate. And to this point where it's like, it's this unending perspective change that keeps on happening. You have to just try to like keep this balance, and do it for the right reasons, which is, you know, because you care about it, you know, because
Right. Right. Right.
after that, after the zenith of the Ginn stuff led to the Black Flag reunion with Ron Reyes, where we did a handful of shows. Then the following year, where we did the entire tour, and
Yeah.
you know, I mean, it's like, and then after that, you know, like you can't be in this place of what's next, give me more, because I mean, you start to think, well, I guess maybe when the Misfits do a reunion, we'll be the first one they call, and I guess maybe when, you know, like, and when the Addicts do one, like it's
They'll
just,
call
you
us
know,
too. Yeah. We're just
yeah,
that
you have to,
reunion
you know,
band.
yeah, yeah, and you know, you have to get out of that thinking. I think like as soon as we came off that tour, like we had shows at you know, at our, it wasn't like we like, you know, maybe had we had some sort of like actual management and someone been like, hey, you should stop and like hook up with some sort of company now that books you and do it. We just were like, oh my God, that was amazing. This is a big rub. We have a lot of different markets now that we could write to and book ourselves. We didn't, you know, we didn't think to want to change our operation in any other upwardly way. We thought, hey, you know, like, I mean, this could be as good as it gets. That was great. We're going to go back to burning our route and doing what we do. And that's kind of what we done. I think that's where, you know, what we achieved in getting, you know, somewhere with all the touring, that's when we handed over our ideas to like, let's start to achieve some things like in the studio that we want to achieve now, not just like keep on writing collections of songs that feel good and like making albums, but let's get crazy. Maybe let's have a guest at one point. Let's do stuff. And that's when the thinking, I think, started to open up a bit more. And we started collaborating with Darriau not long after
Matt.
the end that with Matt Darriau.
Matt
Yeah,
Darriau.
we came back from that Black Flag tour, and we put out an album called "A Night at the Fights," which we had been kind of playing a lot of the songs on the road with them. And not too long after that, we kind of started to feel like, okay, well, you know, the thing that we've seen to be something that's universally respected amongst other artists. And, you know, I have respected it as a fan of other artists, and from artist to artist, when you watch artists do stuff that's fearless, you know, and grow and go ahead, and not when it's aimed and like it's clearly planned and this is just a career change or whatever, or like some you know, calculated thing, but organically, like what? Like I think part of the whole like loving Neil Young, you know, like and his constant changes and stuff, and I'm a very big Lou Reed fan. His consistent changes all the way up through like dropping an album like Lulu at the end, which everyone can't
Yeah.
stand. You know, I mean, come
That was an
on.
interesting,
Yeah,
interesting
and
record.
interesting to say the least. No, I mean, but I mean, and all the artists that have, I mean, the greatest chameleon magic man of all time, Bowie, who's constantly shown us new ways with every single different step he's taken that all are familiar and there already, but brand new because he shone a light on it. But the point is, I think after like we kind of felt like, well, we don't know if we'll ever get another tour that big again, and it's not like suddenly we're signed to some big machine that makes us into something else. We're still exactly who we were before we stepped into the van. Now we're out of the van. And like, you know, I mean, we can't expect to always be brought along on these tours. We want to keep on doing what we're doing and branching out. But like I said, we started to focus a little bit more, I think, on taking chances and doing some different things in the studio. And that kind of is where collaborating with Darriau came in, and eventually moving in the direction of like the newer material that we have coming out now, or that we've been putting out as of recently.
So they kind of speak on that. So like when you listen to like Shoot the Freak, like or like a earlier record, it's very like it's just the two of you guys. But when you recorded, did you layer parts or do you use a loop pedal at all? Because at
Well, yeah,
times,
I definitely there's a huge pedal board at play.
yeah,
To speak directly to Shoot the Freak was recorded at the same time, that EP, as the Manic Children of the Slow Aggression album. They were both done down at Inner Ear with Don Zientara, and that was a session where I definitely, I did at least guitar overdubs,
okay,
where I laid in some extra some different textures in. So if you're going to speak to the actual, earlier on,
Yeah.
there was definitely some more overdubbing to kind of fill the space. But then when we moved into a little bit later on, we started to work with Martin Bisi here in Brooklyn, and he's his own sonic wizard who deserves, an hour's worth of time to be discussed. But just to condense it down, we started to work with Martin here. Martin's worked with a myriad of artists that we love, adore, and respect, like Swans and Sonic Youth, Africa
Nice.
Bambaataa,
Yeah.
Helmet. I mean, everybody. We don't have to get much further into it, but when it came to Martin, then the albums we've made over the last few years, because we've consistently worked with him a lot, there's been less actual guitar overdubs, and it's been more trickery that I'll actually have happening with loop pedals,
Right. Okay.
laying down like a bedrock thing beneath stuff. Rarely do we go back in and I like double a riff part to make it meatier. Like that's not like, or nor do I do like an unsupervised, kind of what I would call like advanced noodling. I'd say like the early overdubs on the early albums. For me, I would love to go back and have them be super focused, but I don't want to go back in time and change anything. And who knows what happens to you if you go back in time? Maybe you can never come back forward. So let's not go there. But the point is, I feel like I was more inclined to do an overdub session at the end of the whole recording, no matter what, to add some more guitar flourishes, whether or not they'd be able to be done live or whether or not I planned them out too well. Whereas I kind of let go of that idea, and it became more about not just like, well, I only want to do on record what I could do live, because I don't want to cut myself out totally of all the cool stuff you could do in the studio, but I would like to be able to just be creating almost all of the stuff that's coming from the guitar sound from when we're tracking, and not have it be like, a bunch of excessive other guitar parts flying in, flying out. I think there was also the challenge of properly catching our low end, because I hadn't started bi-amping my pedal board yet when we made Shoot the Freak and Manic
Okay.
Children with Don Z and Tara.
Yeah.
I was running my entire pedal board, which includes an octave pedal, which gives me a low rumbling tone.
Right.
I was running the whole thing through a guitar amp. So when I would click over and get the low end, it wouldn't have as much presence. And right after that, I was introduced to the trickery of bi-amping my board, wherein I run my octave pedal directly out to a bass amp, and then I have everything else going through the guitar amp. So the guitar amp's on 100% of the time. The bass amp, it gets clicked on and off 85% of the time, and it adds a lot of dynamic when suddenly the bass goes away. But it's a lot more present as of that changeover. So I think the recordings evolved after that. Once the low end, like if you listen to anything and you think you're hearing a bass player, that's like my octave pedal engaged, and it's just like tracing my steps as I go through my parts on a guitar. So it sounds like a really tight guitarist and bassist playing a part at the same time, but it's just a sound that I'm producing. So
that's badass. Well, that's until those Greg Ginn bass tracks come out. But until, those surface.
Yeah.
But
yeah, those will definitely trump whatever I have going on for sure. I can attest to that.
No, that the work around that problem and like split the signal like that, probably using the Boss L or the Boss line switcher. Is that what you used to do that?
I was using that at first, and then actually Boss updated my well, it's certainly not my signature, but the octave pedal I was using, Boss made like an OC3. Like I had the old school OC2, the brown one, but then they made the OC3, and it has a direct out on the side. So I literally just like run an extra line out of that, so they made it so easy that, I mean, there's been over the years, like, I've had people come up after we play live, and they were like, dude, what do you do to get the bass sound happening? And it's just like, I'm surely not like, like some magician trying to hide my tricks. It's like, hey, if you can utilize anything, utilize it. These are just colors that anybody paints with. I mean, so like I've always pointed out, like, hey, like this Boss octave pedal is like the bass player who never is late to jamming. He never like refuses to do the Tuesday night show because we're not going to get anything out of it. Like he never, quits the band ceremoniously if his song doesn't get played. Like he's just a pedal. So we're going to have to replace him every, 30,000 depressions on them every 100,000 steps, and it's going to break, but we'll just replace them. So yeah, once I started to sort that out, everything kind of came together a lot more. And it was interesting. I think that's why, another thing, when we hit the ground running as a band, we wanted to go forward as quickly as we could, and we felt a great chemistry between the two of us. We knew it was just two of us, and we wanted to function as if that wasn't a limitation, but it took a little while. It took a lot of trial and error at first to get things to where we could go out and absolutely, like kick the door down. And it was by amping the board and some other adjustments that Paul made to his kit. We're all part of that process.
It makes you would only figure it out as you do it. Where did the name Cinema come from?
Oh, that's a good one. So, 1993 or 94, those were very, those important years for me. I mean, I had mentioned earlier, by 94, I had joined my first band just shy of my 16th birthday. I was out playing gigs in places that I was way too young to get into, and that was
nice.
That was really great, really great experience. But to dial into your question, around that time, I was just like a little sponge, absorbing everything possible, every piece of art, everything that I could see. And a big part of that was like movies. I mean, I feel like the culture has kind of maybe evolved a bit now, and I'm not going to comment on like the instant type of quality there is to streaming, and the way we also kind of we just digest our entertainment differently. Like now everything is more episodic. Yeah, and I don't have any problem. I'm not going to get into a whole do about that. Point is, I'm just going back to like the 90s when I was just like, there was movies that you had to see, or if there was, like you had to like spend time with certain things, it felt like. So I was interested in, in anything that was challenging. And there was this French film called Man Bites Dog.
Oh, okay. Okay. That makes sense.
And that's the name of our fourth album. Well, we finally decided it was time to pin the tail on the donkey at that point. And we knew that people would ask the question and we would be able to like really connect it. And we thought we should honor it. But yes, there's a 1993 or 94, I think 93 film called Man Bites Dog, French film. It is a mock documentary. It is a black comedy about a serial killer. Like, how like a mock documentary about Spinal Tap, they follow them around on tour. Well, they follow around this killer on his exploits as he makes his living by killing random people, taking their money, etc. So, it takes the male lead, Benoit. He's very endearing in how he plays the character. So there's a likability to this killer. I mean, it's here I am telling people they should check out a movie about a killer. But the point is this: it follows the killer around on these exploits. He starts to slowly fray and lose his mind about 3/4 of the way through the movie. Like one of the murders goes wrong, things go wrong, etc. So he goes out to a bar with the crew. And they're filming him, and like they're getting progressively more drunk. And it's like his neighborhood pub. It's been in the film earlier. They were there earlier, like the owner knows him. Everyone's really friendly to him. But now he's getting drunk and crazy and unhinged. And they kick him out of the pub. And as they kick him out of the pub, he's starting to just randomly, aggressively sing song words. Just he's making up songs. Almost in spite of being thrown out, like as they're throwing him out seriously, and he starts to sing this kind of repetitive hymn, this cinema, and he's like, I am cinema, like he's saying it's in French, but there's cameras on him, so as he's going down this alleyway drunk before the scene ultimately ends with him falling over, he gets the whole crew to sing along with him in this improvised thing that has this. It comes back repeatedly to cinema. So when I was a youngin', when I was a kid, seeing that, I thought, ooh, that would be a cool band name, and like it would be cool that it comes from that scene. That's what I thought when I was like 15, and things were just so much more precious and not findable then. It seemed like a little holy grail idea that I put in my mind. I mean, obviously, as you move into the Googleable world, it's if the name of your band is like I don't know, like blue cheese briefcase bonanza, if it's something that doesn't exist,
Yeah.
it might be easier to find than if you search cinema and your local cinema complex shows up. But
Right,
it never,
right.
I never wasn't thinking years ago about like about that. I was just thinking like, this is a poignant name. I like it. I'm gonna keep it filed in my mental Rolodex. So kept it saved there for a while, and then it came out to play for this band. So that's the genesis of it. If you get a chance to spend some time with that movie, it's pretty intense. There's some pretty heavy stuff in the movie. It might have been an NC-17 film, but again, it's not just straight up gore. It's
Right.
approached with in a black humor, dark comedy kind of satirical way. And it's worth a spin, and that's where the name of the band comes from.
That's beautiful. I was wondering if it was film inspired because I mean cinema twice, but like, and it's interesting that story is kind of like so you have this character who's losing themselves, right? And they're getting everyone to sing this thing they made up. And in a way, isn't being in a band that to some degree? We want people to hang out and sing the songs we wrote, like,
Totally, man.
right? In a
Totally,
weird way,
totally.
it's a reflective of what it ended up being, the name of a group. Like, that's really cool. Cause like
Very cool.
there's some they kind of lean into some of the new music you have coming out. I don't know about the newest recording, but at least CCMD 2, there's something cinematic about the CCMD records, like because it has like this space and this almost like free jazz approach, this improv approach, which if I read right was kind of inspired from the Shiner tracks, like to allow that like improv to be its own thing. Um, but and it also kind of reflects on like if you started on trumpet, there'd be some jazz influences, and if your cousin was like in the jazz groups, I get these like Sun Ra Coltrane vibes from both those records.
I mean, first of all, that you've done your homework and you know of the Shiners. I appreciate you. I appreciate you.
I appreciate you.
Um, yeah, man, this is a lovely conversation. This is the 4 hour episode. We had to, we cut 3 hours. It came down to four. No,
No,
the point is, no, this is a lovely conversation. Thank you for digging in and knowing what you're talking about. Yeah, the oh boy, the striving to kind of like break through. It kind of was like we've gotten as heavy and crazy as we can get. How do you get heavier and crazier? Show them a face they've never seen.
right.
I mean, I think at the core of all the music that I've really attached deepest to, because I love all music. I'm not going to sit here and say that I don't love a song that is more song like than I don't, just to be generalized. I mean, I'm not going to say like Band on the Run by Wings is bad because it's not like like Camarillo Brillo from Frank Zappa, or it's not
Right.
like whatever is the lead track on a Mahavishnu orchestra, Birds of Prey, like, I mean, it's I'm not, there's no like comparing it. It doesn't make sense to compare. What it is, it's like
Yeah.
it's that sense of like like the freedom that kind of is embodied. That I think that we were feeling is what could break the barrier of getting heavier than wherever we had been before, and maybe allowing ourselves to be quieter than we had ever been. Maybe allowing ourselves to really look at dynamics differently. Maybe allowing
Yeah.
ourselves to do a session that based in the Shiners, where we would take one section of time during every recording session for every album and say, okay, we trust our instincts enough that we want to do an improv song. Let's do it. Boom. And we started that with the Shiner series, which you referenced. And that was the beginning of this idea of like, what if we took our chances and really went for it and did full blown improv and for an album. And I think that where that seed really grew for us, even um, uh, before the first Shiner, or where it grew from for the first Shiner, was what we do on stage. As I mentioned earlier to you, like when I mentioned how at the end we crash land the set and then we wind up, turning down the amps and there's a hug at the end, etc. But The point is that crash landing of the set. It's this thing that we kind of, we take up off the ground and we don't come touching down. It's not like, well,
Right.
we've done the first song and call and response. Will you be clapping now? Hang on, I have something witty to say about today's weather next. It's not that.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
there's a hi, how you doing town that we're in, or people that we know here, and we're really happy to play. We're this band. We're going to do this thing. All right. And then we start to play. And what we do is, there's improv from the get-go. Like, I wouldn't say that any two shows start off exactly the same. We eventually, of course, hook on to what is the beginning part of the program, but we simmer and cook just for maybe a few seconds to a minute. It's, who knows, it's improv there. Then we're on to what we know. But at the end of that first bit of the first song of the program, where the song would traditionally end, we then allow the fractured bits to continue to go onward. Maybe Paul
Yeah.
grabs a drum beat. Maybe now I'm looping something. Maybe now we're about to play something we're never going to play again, and it's the best thing that we ever played. What happened was, we were having so many people over the first few years of the band say, like, yo, the stuff you guys do between the songs is really cool too. And we'd always be like, wow, when you're really
Yeah.
in it and improving, like, you don't, it's like a sneeze. I can't tell you what it was. It just happens, because that's, when it happens in the moment, you're not planning the moment. So it's not like, oh, well, I always play that 6-note figure and I'll just do it 5 times in a row. It's like, I don't even know where I just was. I came out of a trance. Holy cow. But people were reacting to it. So I think Paul and I were saying there, okay, let's do improvised bits on each album. And it grew out of that further into, maybe we should, do that at a larger scale. And lo and behold, that was when we also happened to have Matt come into our orbit. We had gotten back from the Black Flag touring, and, knowing that we had just played like our biggest shows yet. And, we were
Right.
putting out an album that was very much in the argot of the loud, crazy punk, talk rock madness that we were doing then. So we were kind of like, we were in a good place, in a good space. And a mutual friend of ours, who at the time was like working alongside us a bit in support type ways for the band, and was also working alongside Matt Darriau, had said, you guys love improving. Matt is a great improviser. Like, he might not on its face, he might not be thinking, hey, I want to go run and, bring my bag of wind instruments along to this crazy loud duo punk psycho band who practice in a tiny shoebox room. But, I think that I could kind of get him to come over. And like, it was this thing where it's like, okay, well, tell Matt if he'll come to our practice space this afternoon, we'll jam. And if it feels good, we'll see what happens. And that was, that was within a few months after coming back from the Black Flag tour. While we were wondering, like, we were thinking, like, what's next? What would be next? And regardless, and while we were waiting for something to come along, we knew we had to do something, ourselves, regardless, because that's how, if we'd be waiting along for what's next, I'd be waiting still, So it was just like, okay, well, randomly, we were thinking about maybe doing some more of an improv type of session, and then boom, we meet this horn player. Oh, he'll come over. Oh, he's, it's instant magic. And like, they were like, okay, well, let's book a gig. So we booked a gig together. And that's where the whole CCMD, CCXMD, like the letters that seem to be like a Roman numeral, which is why we stuck with them as a title, because it's kind of confusing when we really liked that. But ultimately what happened was, the band is, Paul and I are cousins, from January 11th, 2008, we started this thing. That's Cinema. When we started to play with Matt Darriau, being that we didn't know what it was, when we went right into like, okay, well, let's play a gig. And we went out and did a gig, and we started to figure out, okay, what do we call this? Okay, well, CCMD, is a way to at least try to name it as like, or maybe the CCXMD trio. Like, we're trying to signify that this isn't Cinema and it's not Matt Darriau, it's us together. How do we say that? So we were toying around with just how to list the, and ultimately whatever we landed on, there was only a handful of shows that we did, but we did come across that CCXMD kind of like, and the fact that it kind of looked like a Roman numeral, like it came to us early on in the goings, before we ever even knew that we would actually release anything with Darriau or record anything. It was just the challenge at first of, how do we intermittently go from being this loud, insane punk band that crushes you with, with our might and our weight, to like this, like, ooh, this sounds like a soundtrack to a weird movie band. Like how does that happen? So we were kind of like, it's interesting that it started off with playing live, and after 2 or 3 shows, and the reaction that we had people who knew us and knew that we were crazy and knew we were doing something different, but people who came and checked it out, and they were like, "Yo, this is pretty interesting." So we were like, "Okay," and then we went. I think the reason why the CCXMD2, the new album, and CCXMD, the one from 2019, its brother or its sister or its cousin, or it's if that's the first one, this is the sequel, or this is the conclusion to the sessions. The point is, when we recorded these, we didn't automatically say this is coming out. Like we went to the studio. We had, if you trace the trajectory of our albums up to then, like I said, it's like rock to heavy rock to punk to punkish metal to avant-garde to weird, the desperate screaming pleas of insanity, but still it's not free jazz, quiet, weird, ambient soundtrack. It's none of that yet. So when we went into the studio, and we went in with the idea of like, let's observe no rules, let's just improv, maybe we'll get a song, maybe we'll get something. And like magic happened, and like an hour passed, and we went in and out of 2 or 3 jams without having much conversation at all. And Paul and I will play together till the cows come home. We were kind of thinking, well, if Darriau's feeling it, we'll go for as long as he wants to. And he was really feeling it. And then we started to discuss, like, well, why don't we do something that sounds like this? Or why don't we do something that sounds like this? Or, something that's staccato, or something that's insane, or something that's longer than anything you could imagine, or something that's so ambient. And we started to like throw out some ideas. So the first half of the session is this kind of like primally connected jams that we all had kind of like laying within us somewhere. Then the second half of the session is like, we had a little discussion, like Darriau might have had a sip of wine. I enjoy water. Paul might have had an iced tea. I don't know what everybody had during that little break, but we also had some conversation. And then we started to try to achieve some musical concepts with the second half of the session. And we came away with what we felt like 2 albums worth of really good, interesting, sounds like nothing we've ever done before stuff. What are we gonna do? And that was, because we recorded, we just weren't quite sure that we were gonna be so bold as to be like, well, suddenly we're a jazz band, And then what it was, Man Bites Dog. We put up Man Bites Dog in 2017. That went really well. We collaborated with a UK label on that. We did. We've done a lot of European touring, but we did a bunch more with that, and we were feeling really strong and positive about it. And we said to ourselves, okay, well, we're writing a bunch of new material, but we do have this weird jazz stuff. Maybe we should release a bit of it. Maybe. So we started kicking around the idea a few years ago, and it still was kicked around with like a very like, we're not quite sure if we're going to take this dive. This is way, way far out. And then Paul and I listened to it a little bit more, and we were just like, we can't not put this out. Like, we're like, this would be the most insane. Why are we thinking twice about this at all? Like, let's run forward, And then it became, the plan was CCXMD, and CCXMD2 was going to come out like more like last year. Had it's funny when you say plan, and then you're reminded of things like COVID in the world, like it's hard to plan anything. But, when we dropped CCXMD1 in 2019, we thought, okay, if this goes well, which it did right away, sometime late next year, we'll drop the other half of this, and then we'll have seen, both sides see the light of day. And then what happened was, COVID stopped everything, and all our plans for 2020 stopped, and we just kind of froze, and tried to be appropriate and take care of things at home, and not focus on, like, I relied on my artifacts of the artists I love around the house. I leaned on the arts inside my house during the lockdowns. I loved music. I loved my literature, my books. I loved my wife and my dog, and I hoped that my family wouldn't die. And I felt like I don't know that I can post on a social media about a band, even if I'm in it. Like, this is crazy, like it just went through a really weird period last year. So,
especially in New York, that's a rough, like, that was super shut down. There was no way to do anything. Like,
yeah, it
nor
felt
would you
really
want to. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it just didn't feel right to even do anything other than like just be appropriately scared and hiding.
Right.
So, we spent last year, we had music we had already recorded that needed mixing, so we were lucky that we could remotely work on that stuff. But we did spend last year hoping that we could put out new music this year, being, CCXMD2, and get out and play some shows. I mean, we're glad in that we're getting the album out now. We're thrilled because it really represents this insane, far out, casting the point of the ship straight into the absolute unknown, as far away from everything that we've done before. We love that this album represents that, and we also know behind the scenes we have our next like 2 albums essentially kind of crafted up. One of which
Yeah.
is entirely done, mixed, mastered, and sequenced, and the other one we're laying track on now. And they both don't sound anything like this. The next one sounds like insane, wacko, just
Yeah.
and Thor Harris, who's a guy who's in Swans and a bunch of other bands. Thor plays this
Nice.
percussion. He's a percussion machine. Thor Harris collaborates with us on that next album, so it's like a trio, but it's us with Thor. So there's some stuff that has double drumming, and
That's
that one,
sick.
yeah, that's nothing like this jazz stuff. That's some weird broken down crazy psychopaths in a busted up church going nuts. And then the newest one that we're working on has Matt on it again, and it's not just the free jazz. It's the free jazz, but it's through a different kind of lens, and there's some other kind of like song type stuff thrown in. So I say all
Okay.
that to kind of breadcrumb trail out that we do have a lot of stuff. We're not going anywhere. We're just kind of like we're just a little concerned with the world because like it's so hard to not automatically be telling you that we have like in at least 2 weeks of shows like planned as like in support of our record, a tour. It's just so commonplace as we observe those traditions of like we're a band, we put out albums, we play shows, we also
Right.
practice and we do interviews when we can, and we do everything like we care about it and we make it all count. So this weird thing of like we haven't been able to practice regularly, and then we want to play shows, and shows are back, but we have three shows confirmed for October. We have 2 other that we're looking at that are on hold, but we also know that if it's not safe for everybody in the next few weeks, then we're not going to
Yeah.
do
There's
shows in October, and it becomes this
right.
game time call when we thought for sure we'd be like, we wanted to wait until the second half of 2021 to put out any music. We felt like when the news of the vaccine came, the beginning of the year, we were just like, let the world start healing, So we waited as long as we could, and we waited a long time, and now we even was like, well, if we put out the album in August, we won't do shows till October, and that'll give it more time. And now we're here, and it's early August, and we're still watching. We're thrilled that the new
Yeah.
music's coming out. We have some shows. We were hoping to announce them with the actual album release on August 20th, but if it becomes not safe for everybody, we don't want to do anything that puts harm on the menu. We want to do stuff that brings joy to the menu. So we're hoping we could get back to that. But it does feel great to at least be in a posture like where we're releasing album number 6. I'm on the Zig at the Gig show having a great conversation. Zig knows about Shiner number 4, number 3. Zig knows about Trumpet and in my past. I mean, I'm grateful for this encounter. So I mean,
Likewise.
this is really nice. I do hope that we can be triumphantly playing shows and eventually playing in your town, and we can shake hands and
Yeah, that would be
enjoy
awesome.
a face-to-face occurrence. I just hope that it's safe for everybody to do that.
Yeah, no,
It's
100%. Because you want, ideally, we're bringing people together for a transcendental event, like something that's gonna inspire you to follow your passions and your bliss. But you don't want to do that in an environment where, hey, you might die.
exactly. It's
Right.
like it's
Or
like
maybe you don't. Maybe it's someone else you know. But so I think that just I think that just speaks more highly of your character, and like, and that's awesome. That's awesome. And it's for a group like you guys that road dog as hard as you do, and like, to just how we've talked earlier in the conversation with the amount of shows, and like, if get in the van is like, this is the key, and basically get in the van is like, get in the van and like, be uncomfortable for a long time, play as many shows, be constantly tired and hungry, like, if that's if those are the keys you're going with, it's like, it just speaks on the purity of your character. And like, I think it was a beautiful way to kind of cap it in like, okay, maybe these shows don't happen, but they will eventually. and it's badass to hear that even if they don't, there's still new music coming out, and the fact that each of these next like 3 projects, counting CCMD too, that are coming out are completely different avenues, is super badass, and it's super cool that you're adding like a flavor to the two of you, and like seeing what that is and letting that just be one thing. So I'm super excited to hear the next 2 records, my friend.
I can't wait to appear back on this podcast for the promotional cycle for those 2 records. And any time that happens in between where you need another manic, insane conversation about anything music related, I'm happy to come back. I'm sure you're counting the days. But the point is, I'm
No, I'm
really looking
down.
forward to it, and I'm
I
looking forward to talking to you again in the future. And this has been a very nice, dynamic conversation that I've appreciated entirely. And a note about that live music scenario. I mean, what I've noticed from playing almost 500 shows in this band, playing a couple of hundred shows in bands before this, and being a fan at like hundreds and hundreds of shows, is that there's so few places in the world where you can take a large group or a small group of strangers and get them to agree on something
right.
without much coaxing,
Yeah.
get them to entirely unify. And the power of music, that universal language, is the thing that like zips the both sides up, zips the coat right up into a comfortable, snug like position. And that's why we feel so sacred about it. That, I mean, whether we're playing to one person, no people, 1,000 people, whoever, we want it to, want it to be safe, I mean, because that's the place where we all feel safe together, regardless of what other things are at play in our minds. For that time that we can all tune into those sounds, like we're all agreeing that like life is good, like let's be here now. So, I just wanted to kind of mention that at the end, because we miss it a lot, but I have, I almost purchased tickets to see King Crimson
Yeah.
outdoors in
Oh, that'd be
September. I
sick.
mean, I'd like to do that. I'm not sure. I do have tickets to see the Mesthetics, which is a group
Nice.
that's two
Joe
thirds of.
Lally.
There you go.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
I have tickets to see them
You
in
guys would be a
October.
good fit for that. That would be a really badass bill.
Well,
Cinema and aesthetics.
that's a
Yeah.
that's a dream bill. If the dream gods are out there, please let them sprinkle down, dribble down little bits of rain on those crops, and let
Oh,
those seeds be watered. And Aesthetics would come out and play with you anytime. They are
Joe's.
fantastic. Both
Yeah,
both
Joe's
records
such a
are
good group.
off the hook.
Good
Oh my
group.
god!
Joe's such a good guy. I meant to say. Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
That would be a tight bill.
that would be a dreamlike scenario for sure. I hope that we can be having all this fun soon. I hope that everyone stays safe, and that, I mean, regardless, the main thing is, we just kind of, stay out of each other's way and stay together in all this too. I mean, it's there's
Yeah.
just so much, not to open up a whole new conversation, but it's an interesting time we're in, this evolution, and I feel like we could come through it stronger and better, just like any big large challenge. But it's just, right now it still seems really scary and raw and constantly evolving. So if we don't get to do the shows, it'll be one of the smaller, more tiny problems in the world, because nothing's really going to stop us no matter what. And we're going to keep at it. We gotta, I mean, it makes us kind of tick, so that's where we're at.
That's awesome. Well, Ev, man, this has been awesome. Well, hey, man, I appreciate it. And I'm excited to hear the new stuff. And I'll be in touch with you in a few weeks with all the details on this. And be in touch when we want to do the next one so we can promote the next record. It'll be dope.
Awesome. Thank you so
Awesome.
much for your time today.
Likewise. Hello,
Hello?
Ev.
Yeah,
Hey, how's it going? It's Dave.
that's good. How are you?
We had an interview scheduled today for the Zig at the Gig podcast
With whom?
with Ev. Is this Ev?
Oh, no, no.
Oh, okay.
That's not
Sorry.
me. Okay.